Check out the recruiting ranking for Virginia Tech in 2020. You may be a bit shocked like I was just seconds ago. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down National Signing Day team by team. We stop in Blacksburg, talk to Mike McDaniel from
Sports
Best Buy
Illustrated
Now,
now, Mark.
ESPN
Sports
Blacksburg,
Illustrated.
Hokie Hangover, on down the line. Just about every outlet you can think of, you'll find Mike. Join him on Twitter. That's the easiest way to do it. Mike, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Mark. Virginia Tech closed strong here with this signing class. It's not the best effort of this coaching staff, Justin Fuente and company. It's not the best class they've put together. They know that. But they did finish strong. So I would definitely like to get into that portion of it as well.
Well, let's do that first and foremost, because that's the late breaking news with Alec Bryant coming in.
Yeah, so Alec Bryant comes in, and that's on the heels of Robert Wooten, a defensive end out of Stafford, Texas, committing yesterday. When Robert Wooten committed out of Stafford, Texas, it was actually Virginia Tech's first recruit from the state of Texas in over 30 years. There was record dating back to like 1987. Virginia Tech has never had a kid come out of the state of Texas as a freshman. They have brought kids in like Michael Brewer, like Gerard Evans, via transfer. But they have never had a recruit in the last 30 years come out of the state of Texas. So, Virginia Tech's coaching staff and Justin Fuente is from, that area of the country. They've always wanted to get more inroads and make more headway in Texas because of the talent that's present there. It's been more of a push over the last 3 or 4 months. And I think the reason why is because they're not winning the state of Virginia like they used to. And that's pretty significant, Mark. This has been a state historically that Virginia Tech has recruited very well, and they have really, really struggled, especially this recruiting class, in getting kids out of the state of Virginia. Newport News is one of those areas in the Tidewater that Virginia Tech has historically done very well in, and they have not been able to pull the recruits out of there like they used to. And there's a number of factors for that. Number one, Virginia Tech's coming off of a 6-7 year last year, right? It was their worst record since '92. That didn't help with this recruiting cycle. Now, the Hokies were able to bounce back this year with the quarterback change and a couple things they were able to do offensively. After the month of September, they were able to bounce back, and now they're in a position where they're 8-4 going into a bowl game with an opportunity to win 9 games for a third time in 4 years. And that's pretty significant, considering where they were when Justin Fuente took the program over for Frank Beamer. It was on a slide, 6-7 win season. So they're trending back in the right direction. At least it seems that way. And I think that the positive traction that they made, especially over the last couple of days with the signings of Wooten and Bryant and getting bigger on the defensive line, is something that they've wanted to do. And they were able to do it with this Texas to VT movement. They're doing the hashtag TX to VT on Twitter. And it's been this whole movement. And, they got a 4-star quarterback out of the state of Texas that's verbally committed for next year, Demetrius Davis. And these were the first 2 guys who were actually able to sign here in Alec Bryant and Robert Wooten. So, hopefully this continues for Virginia Tech, but at the end of the day, I do think they need to get back to winning the state of Virginia too, which is certainly a shortcoming in the signing class.
So the early signing period has become quickly the signing period. I know that the numbers that I saw over the last couple of years were in that 75 to 80% range of the Power 5 type players, that level of talent signing here and now, and that just seems to be increasing. I just checked out the top 300 players. There aren't a whole lot there. But you're still optimistic because there's a few leans out there going Virginia Tech's way toward February.
There are. I mean, there's some guys who are out there still that Virginia Tech would like to get, ironically, out of the state of Virginia and the Tidewater area. So there are a couple guys, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you, Mark, this is going to be a world beater signing class. It's not. It's not going to get much better ranking-wise than it is right now. But it is a class that could end up looking a lot better a few years from now. At least that's what the coaches are thinking, and that's what an optimistic Tech fan should be thinking, than maybe a lot of the pundits thought, right? And this was a class for Virginia Tech that was ranked in the bottom of the ACC for the better part of the last 5 or 6 months, and they were able to jump back to 13th today, which is not something you necessarily want to hang your hat on, but you should at least take some solace in the fact that you were able to land a high-ranked, high-end 3-star defensive end and another 4-star defensive end out of the state of Texas. I think that's significant. The one thing I will mention, Mark, and this is this ties back to some recent staff changes that they've had, is Justin Fuente and his staff, when they got to Virginia Tech back prior to the 2016 season, one of the big areas that they emphasized was the need to recruit better. Virginia Tech has never been a program that has cracked the top 15. In fact, they've been historically a top 20 to 25 program overall nationally recruiting, and a top 3 or 4 team in the ACC. But, it's a different conference now. Florida State's a little bit down the last couple of years, but, they're only 5 or 6 years removed from a national championship. You have Clemson going on their run. Miami is still recruiting well, even though they're not coaching well. And you have Mac Brown, who's recruited well in the state of Texas and at North Carolina prior to that. He's back at North Carolina recruiting well. And you got Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech. So there's a lot of competition in the ACC right now recruiting, and a lot of schools are doing it at a very high level. And Justin Fuente made some changes on his coaching staff to reflect that. A lot of people were expecting him to maybe make a move at offensive coordinator, moving away from Brad Cornelsen, considering how the season went offensively for Virginia Tech. And they were able to finish strong, but I think a lot of people were calling for that shoe to drop if you were going to make a change on defense, on the staff. But then all the changes so far have been made on the defensive side of the football. You consider the fact that Brian Mitchell, the cornerbacks coach, he has not recruited well under Justin Fuente, but he was able to coach up Caleb Farley to an all-ACC selection. Jermaine Waller was one of the more improved corners in the conference this year, and Armani Chapman was one of the best nickelbacks in the conference this year for Virginia Tech. They had actually a pretty good secondary, and Brian Mitchell ends up leaving, right? So they part ways with him because he just didn't recruit well. Charlie Wiles, one of the best defensive line coaches in Virginia Tech's storied history. He's been there as long as Beamer has. He parts ways with the program, right? So now all of a sudden it's like, what is necessarily happening here where's the trend? Like, why are these guys who have been there a while moving on? And the answer is recruiting. They haven't recruited great on the defensive line. They haven't recruited great in the secondary. And they've hired Darryl Tapp, who's an unproven defensive line coach. But he was a Virginia Tech Hokie from the 757, from the Newport News Tidewater area, who's young enough to relate to those kids. They're bringing him on to recruit. Adam Lechtenberg took over for Zon Burden as the running backs coach. That was a hire that really raised eyebrows to many, because Adam Lechtenberg has been a player personnel guy for Virginia Tech. He's got no coaching experience at the running back position, which Virginia Tech brought Jerry Kill as an offensive analyst. He basically took the role as de facto running backs coach, but he's been an analyst because his health permitting, right? He's a guy who left numerous positions in the past due to his health, and he's in a position now where he wants to help out and stay in football, and he's done that with the running game. But Virginia Tech's running backs coach, Adam Lechtenberg, who everybody was questioning heading into this week, considering he was just hired a week ago. He has no prior coaching experience, just a personnel guy in the past, ends up being the highest rated recruiter on Virginia Tech staff this year, according to 247. So it's a clear move away from conventional coaching, which it'll be under the microscope for Justin Fuente, and he's making a clear move towards recruiting. But they really, really need to be careful, and they got to put the foot down, pedal to the metal now moving forward into 2021, where they've gotten off to a strong start. I mentioned Demetrius Davis, a quarterback. He's a 4-star kid out of Texas. They've already they're off to a strong start there verbally, but you got to lock these guys down, and you have to make steps forward in recruiting if you want to close the gap on teams like Clemson, because Virginia Tech's recruiting at a level right now where they can hang with the teams in the Coastal as currently constituted, but that shouldn't be the goal. I mean, Clemson is the standard in college football right now, not just in the ACC, and Virginia Tech needs to try to close the gap as best they can as resources allow, and I think that there's a clear move towards that with some of the staff changes that they've made recently.
Well, there are certainly tiers in every conference in college football, but the strangest tiers are in the ACC, because there's a one-team tier with Clemson, and then you would expect Florida State and Miami to be there because of the recruiting bases that they have in the States. And Virginia Tech is usually right there as you just outlined, a top 20 to 25 program historically, meaning in the Frank Beamer and after era. And then you've got all sorts of teams that typically win 5, 6, 7, 8 games, from Duke to Pitt to Louisville and on down the line. But Scott Satterfield coming in at Louisville, doing an exceptional job his first year. We see Jeff Collins and what he's done at Georgia Tech, taking a bad situation, not necessarily a bad situation, but a difficult transition, And he's obviously spun a positive narrative to these high school kids to say, you can be at the outset of something special, the beginning of something. We're revamping this whole thing. We're doing it over, and you can be part of this. And you can be kind of a pioneer and revamping and kind of reestablishing this program. Obviously, you mentioned Mac Brown, what he's done at North Carolina. They suddenly have been rejuvenated, and North Carolina's kind of a chic destination all of a sudden. So Virginia Tech certainly has its challenges in regards to those certain programs that you would expect to be difficult to compete with, but now other programs that have something going for them that have lifted up the bottom of the ACC.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Satterfield. That's a great point because he's done a great job at Louisville. Obviously, Coach of the Year this year in the ACC, but he's done a nice job recruiting as well. I mean, there are a lot of really, really intelligent coaches and a lot of really, really intelligent staffs in the ACC. And, you know, people have made fun of the ACC this year for multiple reasons, and a lot of the teams that took a step back or didn't perform
Not
with
me,
expectations.
Mike. I haven't.
Never. Never. No, but I mean, when you look at the ACC over the last 5 years, outside of Clemson, it's been a pretty strong conference. They've had a down year this year, obviously, on the field, but you know, you see the potential in the conference to get back to where they've been the last 4 or 5 years, which is really the best the ACC's been in a really, really long time, top to bottom. When you consider, you know, Clemson at the top, you consider the depth that they've had. You know, Miami is a couple years removed from a 10-win season. You know, Virginia Tech is a couple years removed from a 9-win season, and before that, a 10-win season. North Carolina was plenty competitive under Larry Fedora up until the last couple of years before Mac Brown was hired. So it was a pretty strong conference, and that's before you even consider Louisville, who was pushing the envelope, trying to make a playoff a couple of years ago before they played against Clemson. And you know, Lamar Jackson wins the Heisman Trophy and elevates that program. And really, in my estimation, saved Bobby Petrino's job because Petrino just wasn't long for that position there at Louisville. So it's a strong conference still. And you know, Florida State's got potential just because of where they are. And, you know, they've made a good hire, I think, in my opinion, with Mike Norvell. And I do think that they'll take steps forward and get back sooner rather than later. But this is a very strong conference right now. Virginia Tech can't afford to lose the state of Virginia like they did to the likes of UVA, to the likes of Clemson, to the likes of Florida State. You cannot have that happen when you're supposed to be seen as a perennial powerhouse in the state. And, you know, Virginia beats Virginia Tech this year for the first time in a decade and a half. And they were able to take strides forward in recruiting because of it. And, you know, overall, Virginia Tech has a lot of work to do both on the field and off. And it's going to be really interesting to see where they go from here.
It ranks as number 61 right now. We will see what the closing numbers are. They're going to be something in that range for Virginia Tech, but they close with a nice get in one of the top 15 linebackers in the country, in Alec Bryant. Mike McDaniel from ESPN Blacksburg, Hokie Hangover, SI Now. Of course, his podcast with Joey Weaver. You need to catch that as well. Basketball Conference Podcast. Just check out Mike on, what is it? At Mike McDaniel.
SI now. At Mike McDaniel SI now. So you can find me there.
Good stuff. Mike, we appreciate you stopping by.
All right. Thanks, Mark.